Have you ever wondered why the universe puts someone in your path, someone who makes your heart race, only to rip that person away soon after? Why does he show you love and, in the same breath, force you to lose it? Carl Jung said that nothing in the psyche is accidental, that what hurts us the most is precisely what awakens us the most. What if that impossible person wasn't a punishment, but a mirror? What if the love that couldn't be lived was the most mysterious way spirituality pushes you inward? Inward to yourself, inward to the shadow, inward to the self you forgot existed. What you call rejection may just be the beginning of a calling, because sometimes the universe destroys what you want to give you what you need: awareness. And that's what we're going to understand today. Why impossible love didn't come to punish you, but to remind you of who you are before trying to belong to someone else. There are moments when life seems to play with our certainties, and one of them is when someone appears who turns us inside out without even touching us. It's curious how sometimes a look, a gesture, a presence that seems ancient is enough, as if the soul recognizes something the body is still trying to understand. And it is precisely there that the spiritual calling begins, disguised as impossible love. Carl Jung believed that nothing happens by chance within the psyche. Each encounter has the precision of a cosmic clock that moves the gears of the unconscious. That person who seems to have come from our dreams didn't come by coincidence. They came as a symbol, a reminder of what we forgot to be, an echo of everything we abandoned to fit in. Spirituality, in its most honest form, rarely comes gently. Sometimes it arrives dressed in desire, enchantment, longing for something that never happened. It's the way the self finds to call consciousness back home, even if it first needs to break it into pieces. This type of encounter has a strange power. It disrupts what was too neat and tidy. Routine begins to seem small, daily conversations lose their appeal, and even silence takes on a different weight. It's as if something inside us is screaming, "Wake up," but the stubborn ego prefers to interpret this as passion. Jung would say that the unconscious is creative. It uses faces, voices, and encounters to speak to us in symbolic language. Therefore, when someone impossible appears, it's not about the other person. It's about what has been awakened within us. And this awakening is rarely comfortable. It's like opening a window after years locked in a dark room. Light enters, yes, but along with it comes dust, cold air, and the memory of lost time. Spirituality is exactly that. The discomfort that precedes expansion. The impossible encounter is an invitation to an inner journey you never planned to take, but which somehow you always knew was inevitable. What if life wasn't trying to punish you, but to prepare you? Perhaps the inability to be with someone is the universe's way of preventing you from running away from yourself. Because when everything works out immediately, the ego takes the credit. But when fate intervenes, the soul begins to listen. Carl Jung said that suffering is the most effective agent of transformation, and there is something profoundly spiritual in recognizing this. So the next time you feel that knot in your chest for someone who seems unattainable, try not to rush into healing. Observe. See what this presence awakens, what shadow it touches, what forgotten part demands a voice. The impossible encounter is the beginning of the return, the silent clarion call that announces the beginning of individuation. And the most curious thing is that the more you try to understand, the more you realize that this encounter wasn't about human love, but about divine reunion. What comes after that is the mirror. When someone awakens in us a passion so intense that it hurts, it's usually not because that person is the one, but because they have ignited a forgotten part of the soul. Carl Jung said that love is one of the most dangerous phenomena of the psyche, because in it, the unconscious finds a perfect mirror to project everything we repress. It's easy to say that the other person is special, but it would be more truthful to admit they reflect what I didn't have the courage to be. This is the essence of the shadow, everything we deny, control, or pretend not to feel. Impossible love only illuminates what was already there, hidden. It's like a flashlight pointed into the basement of consciousness, revealing traces of courage, freedom, desire, fury, or joy that the ego has learned to lock away. Spirituality at this point ceases to be an escape and becomes a confrontation, because seeing the shadow is the first step in individuation, the process of gathering the lost parts and integrating them into the self. Often, the impossible person is precisely the one who lives in a way that is the opposite of ours, and that's what magnetizes us. If you are reserved, they are free. If you control, they surrender. If you fear judgment, they laugh loudly without asking permission. The charm is not in the person, but in the freedom they represent. Jung called this projection the unconscious act of projecting onto the other the qualities that belong to us, but which we deem inappropriate. That's why passion hurts, because it's a reminder of what we could be, but are not yet. The unconscious doesn't want to give you an impossible love. It wants to return a stolen part of yourself. When you understand this, the pain changes color. It ceases to be despair and becomes a mirror. Every emotion, every unrequited desire, every memory that insists on returning is, in fact, the shadow asking for integration. Real spirituality is not about overcoming the other. It's about enduring the mirror. And here lies the most intimate challenge, to stop trying to possess the mirror and begin to see yourself through it. While the ego seeks the other to fill the void, consciousness tries to use love to expand. The self silently observes and waits for the moment when you stop blaming fate and begin to ask, what did this person come to show me about myself? When this question becomes sincere, something changes. The heart, which previously beat with neediness, begins to beat with presence. The shadow, which seemed like an enemy, reveals itself as a master. And passion, once torture, becomes a rite of passage. Loving the impossible is, in essence, the beginning of loving yourself enough to free yourself from the versions that no longer serve you. But the true test is yet to come, because looking at the shadow is one thing, walking with it is another. That's when pain transforms into a tool. Pain is the oldest language of the soul. No symbol, no doctrine, no philosophy touches as deeply as suffering that we cannot explain. Carl Jung used to say that there is no awakening of consciousness without pain, and this phrase summarizes the journey of every human being who dares to look inward. True spirituality is not anesthesia, it is surgery. Pain does not come to punish, but to open a path. It tears the ego where the light needs to enter. That is why, when something or someone breaks us in two, we feel the ground disappear. In fact, it is the old ground being removed. The shadow, until then silent, gains a voice. The self, which observed from a distance, approaches and forces us to choose, to continue running away or to cross over. It is curious, but suffering, when faced with awareness, does not destroy. It reorganizes. It separates what is appearance from what is essence. At first, the natural impulse is to resist. We try to distract ourselves, rationalize, fill the void with new affections, new goals, new noises. But the unconscious is patient. It repeats the lesson until we learn it. Jung said that what we resist persists, and that's exactly how it is. The more we deny the pain, the more it multiplies in subtle forms. Anxiety, tiredness, insomnia, emptiness. The soul just wants to be heard. And when we finally sit in the midst of the chaos, when we stop fighting against what we feel, something sacred happens. Consciousness awakens. Spirituality shows what it has always tried to say, that pain is not the enemy, it is a guide. Every tear, every loss, every impossible love is a call from the self asking for passage to the new. It's like gold that only forms when the raw metal is subjected to fire. Pain is the fire of individuation. It burns away what is false, reveals what is eternal. And yet the ego tries to negotiate. I want to evolve, but without suffering. It would be like asking to bloom without tearing the seed. There is no growth without friction. There is no awareness without confrontation. Suffering is the bridge that connects the human to the divine within us. And when we finally accept to cross it, everything changes. Not because the world becomes lighter, but because we learn to walk with more truth. Jung compared individuation to a heroic journey, the return of the common man to his spiritual center. And every journey has its dark night. But it is in that night that the soul learns to see in the darkness, to trust its own flame. Pain is the reminder that there is still something alive within us, something that resists, pulsates, and calls for reconciliation. When we understand this, we stop asking the pain to go away and begin to ask what it wants to teach us. And it is precisely in this listening that absence transforms into presence. Few human experiences are as revealing as absence. When the other person leaves, or when fate prevents closeness, the silence that remains is not emptiness, it is a mirror. Carl Jung said that the unconscious manifests itself most clearly in the gaps, in the intervals, in what is lacking. And perhaps that is why what hurts most in an impossible love is not the loss of the person, but the loss of the presence they awakened in us. Before them, you lived, but you didn't feel. You breathed, but you weren't there. After them, the world became more alive, and paradoxically more painful because the soul was reminded of its own depth. It's as if the self was saying, see how much you are capable of feeling, see how much you were asleep. Absence, then, is not punishment, it is a clean mirror. It shows who you were before and who you are being invited to become. Human consciousness always seeks to fill voids, but spirituality teaches that there are voids that were not made to be filled, but rather traversed. When someone leaves, and the heart insists on returning to that place where there is no one left, it is not longing for the other. It is longing for yourself in your most awakened version. Jung called this a compensatory reaction of the psyche. The unconscious uses grief to push consciousness to the center. This is why the silence of absence, when endured without escape, becomes a portal. It reveals that true loneliness is not being without company, but being without presence. And it is at this point that the shadow whispers again. Everything that was projected onto the other returns home, asking for integration. Pain becomes a compass, emptiness, a wordless prayer. The self silently observes and gathers the pieces, transforming loss into return. And then something changes. One day, without warning, the air seems lighter. The face in the mirror no longer carries only longing, but maturity. Absence has fulfilled its mission. It has returned you to yourself. What was once pain becomes space. What was once lack becomes awareness. Individuation happens precisely there, when what seemed like destruction reveals itself as invisible construction. And ironically, the more one accepts the void, the more presence is born. It is Jung's spiritual paradox. Only those who say goodbye to everything can truly find themselves. Absence teaches what presence never could, that love does not depend on proximity, but on inner truth. And when this truth begins to pulsate, a new clarity emerges. The other was not the source, but the reflection. From this point, awakening begins to take shape, and what was once loss becomes the basis for the next step, the awakening of consciousness. Carl Jung said that we don't fall in love with people, we fall in love with symbols. This is perhaps one of the hardest truths to accept, but also one of the most liberating. When something in someone awakens fascination, what truly seduces us is the inner image projected onto that person. Projection is the way the unconscious tries to dialogue with consciousness. It's the symbolic way the soul says, "There's something of yours here that needs to come home." Therefore, every intense passion is an invitation to self-knowledge. Spirituality sees this process as a divine game. The self uses the other as a mirror, so that we can see what the ego refuses to admit. The beauty, the brilliance, the courage, or the mystery we see in the other are in fact qualities that sleep within us, but that need to be awakened. Projection is an attempt by the psyche to remember who we are when we forget. And it is at this point that impossible love becomes master. Because the ego tries to possess the reflection, while consciousness learns to decode it. The problem is not loving. The problem is not understanding what one loves. When we project, we transform the other into a canvas for our idealizations. We want them to save us, complete us, prove to us that we are worthy of being loved. But mature spirituality reveals the opposite. No one can save you from what you still refuse to see. Jung stated that projection is the first step of individuation, the beginning of the return of the unconscious to the conscious. Recognizing that enchantment comes from within is an act of courage. It is admitting that the other is not responsible for what awakens in us. And it is also realizing that the shadow is not evil, it is raw potential. It is the forgotten portion of light that manifests itself in distorted forms when denied. The awakening of consciousness happens when we stop pointing and begin to integrate. When we say, "He made me feel alive," we should ask ourselves, what in me came back to life upon seeing him? This inversion changes everything. Suddenly the focus shifts from lack to the source. The self, previously timid, begins to breathe. The energy that was once imprisoned in obsession with the other returns to the soul as vital force. Pain dissolves into understanding. Spirituality ceases to be an escape and becomes a lucid presence. Projection, once recognized, loses the power to blind us and gains the power to reveal us. And that is where a new kind of love is born, one that doesn't need to be reciprocated to be true. The love that liberates, not the one that imprisons. But before getting there, it is necessary to confront the destruction of a myth, the romantic ideal that keeps us captive. From an early age, we are trained to believe that true love is that which endures, promises eternity, and gives meaning to existence. But Carl Jung said that the greatest human illusion is confusing attachment with love. The romantic ideal, with its promises of completeness and control, is a fantasy of the ego, an attempt to domesticate the sacred. Authentic spirituality, however, doesn't fit into emotional contracts. It demands surrender, not possession. When someone leaves and love continues to pulsate, it's a sign that the feeling has already transcended the human form. This is the death of the romantic ideal, the moment when the ego loses its footing and consciousness takes flight. Suddenly, one realizes that love doesn't need to be reciprocal to be real. It only needs to be true within oneself. The self understands this in silence, while the ego struggles to retain what has already fulfilled its symbolic function. The romantic ideal dies slowly, like an ancient myth that still echoes. It makes us believe that the other should fill our loneliness, heal our wounds, confirm our worth. And when this doesn't happen, the ego calls what is, in fact, liberation, a tragedy. Jung stated that mature consciousness is that which is capable of enduring ambiguity, loving and yet letting go. Spirituality calls this surrender. It is when we realize that love is not a place to stay, but a state of being. The impossible encounter, which previously seemed a curse, reveals itself as a rite of passage. It destroys the dream to reveal the truth. The shadow, previously projected onto the other, begins to be recognized and withdrawn. And it's curious, the more the illusion dies, the more the soul flourishes, because without the demands of the ego, love returns to its original nature, free, vast, and profoundly human. And then the paradox arises. The death of the romantic ideal is the birth of real love, a love that doesn't need guarantees because it is born from consciousness. To love at this level is not to seek security, but to seek presence. It is not to control, but to witness. And this kind of love doesn't depend on a relationship. It depends on an awakened soul. When the self becomes the center, love ceases to be a search and becomes expression. Individuation happens precisely there. The instant love ceases to be a need and becomes creation. Impossible love teaches us that true romance is not between two people, but between you and your own totality. And when this truth is understood, suffering changes its function. It ceases to be a punishment and becomes fuel. It is at this point that the inner fire begins to ignite, transforming pain into strength, loss into power. Carl Jung believed that suffering is one of the purest forms of psychic energy. He said that all pain contains potential. One just needs to learn how to transform it. When an impossible love burns within us, it's natural to want to extinguish the fire, but the secret lies in letting it burn in another way. Suffering, when faced consciously, becomes a laboratory of the soul. Spirituality calls this process transmutation, the act of transforming pain into light, loss into creation, silence into strength. It's the same principle that transforms coal into diamond, pressure and time. The shadow, when embraced, ceases to be an enemy and becomes fuel. The self observes from afar, patiently waiting for the moment when the human being, tired of lamenting, decides to create. And it is precisely there that suffering changes its nature. It ceases to be a prison and becomes an impulse. History is full of examples of people who transformed pain into beauty. Frida Kahlo painted her wounds. Van Gogh transformed his loneliness into color. Beethoven composed amidst deafness. None of them denied suffering, they channeled it. Jung called this symbolic integration, giving pain a creative purpose. It's not about romanticizing suffering, but about understanding it as part of the individuation process. When something tears us apart, it's because something new wants to be born. True spirituality doesn't promise the absence of pain, it promises meaning within it. And meaning is what transforms the unbearable into the sacred. Therefore, when life pushes you towards the abyss, perhaps it's time to build wings along the way. The fire that destroys can also illuminate, depending on where you place it. And the right place is always within, where the self resides. Some believe creativity is a gift, but in reality, it's a response. It's the body saying, pain won't stop me, it will move me. Suffering is the invisible chisel that sculpts the soul until it remembers who it is. Awakened consciousness begins to see the pattern. Everything that was once a cause for lament now becomes material for creation. And this applies to any form of expression: writing, painting, caring, teaching, serving. Everything born from the fire of pain carries a spark of eternity. Shadow, when used wisely, becomes art. Spirituality invites us to make pain a prayer in motion, and it is precisely at this point that the human being begins to realize that nothing was in vain, that each loss was a silent refinement of the spirit. And when this fire stabilizes, the self manifests in its purest form, whole, alive, creative. But the calling is not yet over. The next step is to look inward and unite all the parts. At some point in the journey, when the noise of the world begins to quiet down and pain no longer has the same fury, the human being realizes something that previously seemed unthinkable. Everything they sought outside was, in fact, sleeping within. Carl Jung called this moment the return to the self, the most intimate and sacred core of the psyche. It is when spirituality ceases to be an idea and becomes a presence. The self does not reveal itself to the hasty. It shows itself to those who endured the chaos without giving up on themselves. And curiously, it does not arrive with fireworks or promises, but with silence and lucidity. It is a different, almost strange calm, as if the soul had finally found its own center of gravity. At this point, the shadow no longer frightens, it guides. The unconscious, once an enemy, becomes an ally. Consciousness expands, and the being understands that impossible love, loss, and suffering were merely disguised teachers, pointing home. Self-integration is the heart of individuation. It's not about erasing the uncomfortable parts, but about bringing them together under the same light. Jung said that modern man suffers because he lives fragmented. Sometimes he's the professional, sometimes the lover, sometimes the son, but rarely is he whole. Integrating the self means ceasing to choose which version of oneself deserves to exist. It's looking at anger and realizing that it also holds vitality. It's accepting vulnerability as a form of courage. It's reconciling the human and the divine within oneself. And this integration doesn't happen overnight. It's a daily, silent ritual of brutal honesty. Authentic spirituality is not an escape from contradictions. It's the dance between them. The more you accept your own shadow, the brighter the self shines. And this light, unlike the light of illusions, doesn't blind, it reveals. It shows the way back to the essential. And then something extraordinary happens. The emptiness that once seemed like pain becomes creative space. The love that was once lack becomes a source. The other ceases to be a mirror and becomes a companion when they exist. And if they don't, that's okay. The self fills the void. It is at this stage that consciousness reaches spiritual maturity. The being no longer depends on the external to feel whole. It is its own home. Individuation is therefore a return, not a conquest. The self has always been there, only obscured by projections, fear, and social masks. When this integration happens, the world remains the same, but the perspective changes, and this change is irreversible. The being who rediscovers themselves does not go back to sleep. But before becoming grateful for everything that hurt them, they need to understand the value of what caused pain. That is the next step. The moment when gratitude is born from the abyss itself. The soul only matures when it learns to be grateful for what it once cursed. Carl Jung said that what we accept transforms us, what we deny imprisons us. It's curious to see how, after so much suffering, gratitude arises not as a positive thought, but as an ancient wisdom that awakens in the heart. At first, the idea seems absurd. How can we be grateful for what destroyed our plans, what took someone from us, what brought us to our knees? But spirituality shows that pain is merely the shell of revelation. Within each loss lies a seed of expansion. The shadow, when embraced, ceases to be a threat and becomes a teacher. The silent self observes the human being who once demanded explanations, now beginning to offer understanding. Gratitude is the point at which consciousness stops fighting against life and begins to dance with it. It is when we realize that nothing has been taken from us, only returned to its correct form. Being grateful for what hurts doesn't mean romanticizing suffering, but recognizing the value of the journey. It's understanding that impossible love didn't come to punish you, but to refine you. That absence didn't come to empty you, but to purify you. That pain didn't come to stop you, but to position you. Jung believed that suffering is the clay with which the self molds the soul towards individuation. And when we look back consciously, we see that each collapse was a disguised initiation. Spirituality teaches that the universe doesn't work with chance, it works with symbolic precision. Nothing is random on the path of the awakened. Therefore, when gratitude appears, it doesn't come in beautiful words, but in silences full of understanding. It's that moment when you take a deep breath and realize that what you previously called loss, you now call liberation. And it is at this point that consciousness reaches a new frequency. The pain, which once hurt, now teaches. The absence, which once suffocated, now inspires. And you understand that being grateful is not forgetting what happened, it's integrating what happened into who you are. It's letting the past no longer define you, but refine you. Jung called this the synthesis of the soul. When all polarities, fear and courage, love and loss, ego and self, begin to coexist in harmony. Gratitude is the final seal of this integration. It is the heart saying, "I survived and I learned." It is at this moment that the human being ceases to be a victim of life and becomes its apprentice. And when gratitude blossoms amidst what was once a desert, something even deeper emerges: rebirth. Because everyone who is grateful for what destroyed them is already ready to be born again. There comes a moment when suffering ceases to be a storm and becomes clarity. It is when the being realizes that everything that broke them, in fact, cleansed them. Carl Jung said that individuation is a symbolic birth, the birth of the true self that was buried under masks, fears, and conditioning. Spirituality calls this rebirth, the instant when the soul breathes again with its own breath. It is not a dramatic event, but a silent reconfiguration. The gaze changes, the conversations change, the energy changes. What was once urgency transforms into presence. The self, once a distant idea, becomes the axis of everything. Impossible love, absence, pain, and shadow are no longer ghosts, but sacred chapters of the same book. Each wound transforms into a luminous scar, a reminder that the human being can go through hell and still flourish. Being authentic isn't about being perfect. It's about being whole. It's about living in accordance with your inner truth, even if it displeases the world. Jung stated that the greatest tragedy of modern man is living according to what others expect, and not according to what his soul demands. The rebirth of the authentic being is, therefore, a silent revolution against everything that distanced him from himself. It's about rejecting lukewarm life, shallow affections, empty conversations. It's about having the courage to feel and to feel deeply. Spirituality, when lived at this level, is not doctrine. It's conscious breathing. It's the act of being present in one's own body, in one's own time, in one's own voice. And the curious thing is that after this journey, nothing more needs to be proven. The being that is reborn doesn't seek recognition, it seeks expression. It doesn't want to fit in, it wants to overflow. And this overflowing is the true miracle. It is the confirmation that the pain has fulfilled its purpose. The self, now awakened, leads life with naturalness and silent faith. The shadow has been integrated, love has expanded, and consciousness rests in peace. This is the point where the human being ceases to merely exist and begins to live. Individuation becomes experience, not concept. Spirituality becomes practice, not theory. The authentic being lives in a state of gratitude, not because everything has turned out right, but because they have survived until now by being true. They understand that rebirth is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new one. And perhaps this is the secret that Jung tried to leave us. The awakened soul no longer seeks meaning outside itself, because it has discovered that the very act of living is already the miracle. And it is here that the cycle closes, not with a period, but with a breath, because from time to time, life will ask you to be born again. So, what are you going to do with all of this now? Will you continue asking the universe to return what's gone, or will you use this emptiness to rebuild yourself from the inside out? Carl Jung said that the encounter with the self is the most dangerous adventure, but also the most necessary. And perhaps that is the invitation that life is making to you at this very moment, to stop running away from the pain and start listening to it. Because every absence, every impossible love, every shadow that frightens you, all of that is simply your conscience asking to be heard. Are you going to deny it again, or are you finally going to cross over? The authentic being doesn't wait for signs. They become the sign. Spirituality is not a promise of constant peace. It's the courage to look at what is real. And when you understand that, the impossible loses its power to break you. So, if any part of this video touched you, made you breathe differently, or reminded you of who you used to be, don't let it die here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with me on this journey, because with each new video, you'll remember a little more of what the universe has been trying to show you for so long, that you never lost anyone. You're just rediscovering yourself.